Tanya.
And I'm Trisha, and we'll be sharing about Baumrinds' theory of parental styles and connecting it to Jeffrey Dahmer's life to explain why Jeffrey did what he did.
The basis of Baumrinds' theory of parental styles comes down to 4 different styles of parenting. These are authoritative, authoritarian, permissive, and unengaged. These are all measured by different levels of demandingness and responsiveness.
Demandingness involves parental discipline and monitoring. This often looks like the amount that a child is communicated to with clear expectations of how the child should act in a mature and responsible manner. Responsiveness involves warmth, communication, and displayed affection. This often looks like the amount a child's needs are met, both emotionally and physically, by their parents.
The first style of parenting is authoritative. This is explained by both high levels of demandingness and high levels of responsiveness. Authoritative parents display affection and communicate expectations to their children. This is very important to allow their children to form social bonds and attachments. Another parenting style is authoritarian. This category is defined by high levels of demandingness and low levels of responsiveness. This type of parent can be described as strict, yet lack nurturing and expression of love in their parent-child relationship.
The third style of parenting is permissive. This style has low demandingness and high responsiveness. This type of parent can be explained by parents that have a high priority of displaying affection and showing their kids that they care about them, but don't express or lay out clear disciplinary expectations for their child's behavior. This often leads to spoiled children. The fourth parental style is unengaged. These type of parents have low demandingness and low responsiveness. Children of unengaged parents are neglected and rejected by their parents emotionally and physically. Emotionally through the absence of displayed loving affection, and physically by the lack of expectation and communication. Kids are often left alone to make their own decisions and often act out for attention.
Alright, so now we're going to tell a brief story about Jeffrey's life and explain why he did what he did by use of his unengaged parents as described by Baumrinds' theory. So let's start back at the beginning, shall we? Here, we meet the Dahmer parents, Lionel and Joyce. The important role of parents was bestowed to the happy couple upon the birth of their first son, which they named Jeffrey. At first, his parents were overjoyed. They loved and doted on little Jeffrey as a young infant. In fact, the first 3 years of his life were recounted as happy times.
That all changed when Mrs. Dahmer was diagnosed with depression, leading her to spend most of her time in bed. After Jeffrey's birth, she became quite weak and was in a constant state of emotional instability, leaving her absorbed with her own issues. Jeffrey's father, Lionel, who craved separation from his wife's neediness, was constantly occupied with his studies. Looking to receive his PhD in chemistry, this led him to be away from the house often, leaving his family alone and neglected. A little brother named David came into the picture when Jeffrey was 6 years old, which pushed little Jeffrey further into isolation.
However, Jeffrey's dad did find some time to bond and spend with Jeffrey when he showed an interest in animal bones. The two of them learned to bleach the bones that they would find from dead animals around their property. Presence of an unengaged father overall increases the likelihood of negative effects on a child, and with Jeffrey's father absent so often, it led Jeffrey to use alcohol to cope. This addiction started very early in his high school years. Even as early as the age of 12, Dahmer started drinking heavily, and was even caught consuming alcohol at school, which he would hide among the inner pockets of his jacket.
By the age of 14, he was considered an alcoholic as he attempted to further cope with his loneliness, claiming that alcohol was his medicine. During these adolescent years in high school, his behavior continued to spiral out of control, and so did his parents' marriage. They finally decided to divorce when Jeffrey was 18 years old. Lionel left the family, and Jeffrey's mother moved away with David, and Jeffrey was left alone, even further isolated from his family.
Just 3 weeks after graduating, he committed his first murder, luring an innocent hitchhiker over to his house to simply drink some beers. Upon the guest announcing his plans to leave, Jeffrey struck him over the head. He continued to strangle the victim and completely dismember him. He appeared to be triggered by an intense panic in response to his guest wishing to leave, showing his fear of being alone. During this time, Jeffrey was also under heavy influence of alcohol. A trait, as we said, is often increased in the likelihood deriving from an unengaged father.
Sometime after his first murder, Jeffrey stole a mannequin from a department store. He slept next to it in order to lessen the loneliness inflicted by his parents. Meanwhile, this intensified his desire for control, which led him to put his twisted, evil fantasies into action. And in doing so, it led him to continue on a killing spree, taking the lives of 16 more males. Jeffrey had intense fascination over the bones of his victim and would often preserve what he could of their bodies, such as keeping skulls, claiming they made him feel close to his victims. In keeping bodily remains, Jeffrey felt as though those he murdered would never be able to leave him as his parents did. His control over their bodies satisfied the loneliness and rejection his parents created for him.
The last 4 murders he committed before he was discovered and arrested were all within a 3-week time span, showing his escalating longing to compensate for the rejection by his parents, explained in Baumrinds' parenting theory, and also his intensifying need for any sort of human connection. His life ended, in prison, on the 28th day of November, 1994, when he was brutally beaten to death by an inmate named Christopher Scarver. Who knows what kind of parents poor Christopher had growing up?
As outlined in Baumrinds' theory of parental styles, Jeffrey didn't have the loving or disciplined upbringing as you can see, through the absence of demandingness and responsiveness. For Dahmer, his overwhelming need for simple human companionship was created an overwhelming urge to fight his loneliness, a longing so strong he killed for it.
The end.
Ta-da!